Hey all, I have been doing lots of revisions. A year or so ago, I don't know, with the pandemic, everything's just kind of blurred together. Um, but I celebrated my 5th anniversary as an independent author, and now I have been going through the process of releasing second editions. And I've been doing a lot of revisions to older works, such as a collection of short works 1, and now I'm in book 2. And, I've been finding some stories that are just, I had a lot of fun with. So I wanted to share those. I understand I have the ability to go live now, and yeah, I don't know. Kind of scary. So I figured I'd put out a video for one of the stories that I found. It's a shorter work, well, shorter for me, but I had to release it in 6 videos. A lot of it is more just audio. So if you want to have a little listen while you're getting other stuff done, that's not going to hurt anything. But the story that I chose to read was The Maiden, the Mother, and the Crone. Now, when I put together my first collection, that was just assorted stories of my choosing, what gave me inspiration, etc. Collection of works, short works 2, I had not only stories that were inspired by, say, a picture, but I used a mix of mythology, storytelling that I've heard, which I really enjoy, and also I drew inspiration by having, I asked some friends to offer me photographs for inspiration. So the beginning of this video, you'll find the photograph that inspired the story, and for some reason when I saw the photograph, I just thought of this old story I had heard, The Maiden, the Mother, and the Crone. I've always loved it. There's such symbolism in even in just the ways that it's retold. So this is my take on the story, modern day. Tried to have a little fun with it, and I really hope that you like it. So it's 6 parts. I've got them all marked, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks. See y'all later. Quick side note, there's a couple pieces in here that I may have had issues of mispronunciation. Also forgive my occasional stammering or tripping over my own words. That's the fun thing about this, reading my stuff aloud, live, whatever you want to call it. I'm real. So there you go. Forgive me ahead of time. Okay. Ta-ta. When I was young, living in this vast abandoned wasteland was oddly peaceful and serene. Remnants of a road traveled by hundreds of cars before I was ever born, dividing a barren, flat land cracked from dehydration. Once home to many businesses and families before we ever came along. The tourist-attracting buildings, homes, people, all gone from this once midpoint of travel for this region. Our own little Route 66 in its heyday, leaving behind what looked like a secret military experiment that went horribly awry. Lands we were even unsure would ever recover, but it did. With our coven's help and nurturing, now that broken up desert road is surrounded by varieties of plants, sage and rabbit brush by the mile, tufts of wheatgrass, and sporadically placed western junipers, providing a little shade for something. My favorite is in the spring when all the wildflowers are stretching and slowly bursting to life everywhere. All the names we have to remember: the phlox, primrose, buttercup, monkeyflower, buckwheat, mariposa lilies, and what we call Indian paintbrush. Each one native, natural, and of benefit to almost anything we can create, as chemistry is part of our craft. It was incredible actually being here when the first of the animals began to return, my parents and I catching sight long enough to watch from our windows. Small packs of scouts, then every year to follow more would appear. First come the refugee groups of prey animals. Chipmunks, along with varieties of squirrels, mice, and rabbits, move in when the brush began to really fill out the areas bordering the vast acreage we claimed as ours. However, after the prey, the predator will always follow. Owls, eagles, and other large birds had quickly followed the smaller animals already. Then we began to see and hear small packs of coyotes and the occasional cougar, bobcat, or fox, if we were up early enough to catch them on their way back from a night stroll. Around here, we do see the larger animals like deer, elk, bighorn sheep, and some jackrabbits. The packs of coyotes usually keep those back with their howls and cackles cutting through the night like hyenas. The scent left by the wandering cougar or bobcat is enough to keep many things from our land. Also traps us all indoors until the animals move on at the elders' urging, or they disappear on its own. With over 200 or so different bird species and no fish readily available, our diets include more poultry than anything else. Grouse and quail are very easy to capture here. We have an area that houses chickens and some turkey the elders brought in to raise. We don't keep many larger barn animals. That's too much of an attractant to large prey creatures. We tried warding our lands to create our own sanctuary, but that only blocked all the animals from entering, so we removed it. Some days I look around marveling at our land that fades off into the horizon, beautiful and beyond the reach of other hands, any hands besides ours. I consider how lucky we are to have created a place all our own in this world. Although, this off-the-grid life can be intimidating as well as claustrophobic. There's nowhere to run if anything were to ever happen. No one to run to, but those I see day in and day out. Lives tightly intertwined and dependent on each other for so much. However, at times, we can enjoy this space, and you can go days without bumping into another. That is rare, but it can happen. Those same faces, the only names to call if ever in need. We are as abandoned and cut off from the remaining world as this land. I can't really claim we're abandoned. This was chosen by the Coven Elders. They chose to move everyone. The world, society was changing in such a way that they felt it better to exist on our own and away from mainstream life. A necessary separation to protect our values and way of life as we wish to live, without interference or the judgment of others. Many would consider this cruel to do to us children, to never allow us to see the world or its potential offerings. However, I felt it fit this life nicely in some ways. The curiosity was always there, especially when I became old enough for the Coven to finally make me use my gifts as their asset. Even cut off from everything, I was certainly protected from any loneliness or isolation surrounded by my own Coven family. There was always much to do, so boredom was never an issue. As I grew, so did the environment. That kept us hidden long after the world stopped visiting out here. We are the last and only residents in the past 2 decades that I know of, at least. Before that, your guess is as good as mine. I just know that road can't be that much older than my parents. Sure, we've had the occasional mysterious visitors or stranded drivers hoping this was a shortcut to somewhere. It had been, some time ago. Unfortunately, not all visitors seem to be around for long, only the ones they make me lure here. Before I confuse you too much, let me begin with my life saga that I promise I will try to summarize as best I can. My name is Maya Lorelei Winter. It was explained to me that each piece of my name had specific meaning and was part of my predestined purpose in life. My purpose was unknown to me until the coven told me what that was. Much later in life, of course. It is a practice of ours to wait to name a child for up to 6 months if necessary. However, we are generally fast to show some sign or indication of what our future power or gifts may be. Even at that very tender age in development, some clues can be seen. Maya, my first name, I was told means illusion or fantasy. My mother said when she would come to tend to me if I were fussy, I could make the room entirely transform as she entered. A haven for my mother to soothe me. Once she thought we were trapped in a jungle until I dropped the illusion, startled by a loud noise from another room. I played with that gift much as a child, including learning to hide myself if I were ever in trouble. This ability led my parents to believe I would follow in the footsteps of my grandmother, Lorelei. Lure to the rocks, the seductive siren. I guess she started out with similar stories from her childhood, so I was destined to be some sort of powerful temptress simply because I could create an enticing fantasy world to enjoy or distract. My last name, Winter, not after either of my parents, winter, which is said to mean season of death, which has something to do with the 3 sisters of fate. The sisters of fate weave the fabric, creating the tapestry of life, the seers or deciders of destiny. To the Greeks, the 3 sisters were the Moroi, or Morae, the white-robed incarnations of destiny. Clotho was the spinner of the threads, deciding the color, texture, and strength of each fiber. Lachesis, the allottor, was the one that determined the length of each thread, the design, and final placement of each element of the tapestry. Atropos was called the unturnable, and some simply referred to as death. I would assume she was the one to cut and change to the next thread. These sisters were the Parcae, the sparing one to the Romans, Nona, Decima, and Marta, the feminine representation of destiny. To the Norse, they prefer past, present, and future. That sounds simple enough for me to understand. Now the Latins, they had a little fun with their names of the fates. There was Nona, but I cannot recall what she did. Then we have Lachesis, and she is the one that measures life. Their last sister is called Electo, which is written to mean fury. Fury, rage, and vengeance are emotions. How would an emotion influence destiny or a person's fate? Not very balanced or unbiased to me. As many follow these sisters of fate, we follow our own triple goddess. The 3 goddesses represented as the innocent and enchanting maiden, the sexuality and power of the mother, and finally, the wisdom of the crone. That makes me the crone, since she also symbolizes death and rebirth. Just as winter hides all life protectively until its rebirth in the spring, I was said in conversation even as a young girl, I was wise beyond my years. As my name implies, I also hold qualities of all of the goddesses, my youthful enthusiasm and ability to entrance others as the maiden, my generally nurturing nature, and some sexual awareness as the mother. As the crone, I represent the last phase of the life cycle, including death and rebirth. My powers, my magical gifts, aside from my natural abilities, as the embodiment of all the goddesses, unlike many had seen in our coven for near a century. That would have been my grandmother Lorelei's grandmother's generation. This made me special in our coven. I was treated almost as the chosen one, not necessarily as always a leader, but as a very powerful young woman. I possess gifts and knowledge not all of our elders have, and those that do, it took a lifetime to gain. Somehow, I was just born this way. That caused some contention here and there as I grew and learned early to always test my limits. Although the coven made special rules for such a special girl, and much stricter than any of the others, including my own siblings, I led a very controlled life by the coven, by my family. I was told what to do and when. Seeking out more knowledge or wisdom about my abilities was heavily monitored. My education was specifically tailored, and my academic strides were not encouraged as the rest of the children. I could have been learning to better manage my abilities, but they feared I would only grow stronger and one day I would be beyond control. I already had a strange feeling draw towards the dark and macabre, but our existence is dependent on balance, harmony within our coven and ourselves. I never understood that if my intrigue and the pull of my own abilities directed me otherwise. I was never allowed to learn to properly balance that, or maybe I would have. Many moments I spent resentful of this communal living and oppressive rules, although even more time I spent enjoying the solace only my own mind could provide, despite the chaos surrounding me. My imagination, my illusions, the only safe escape without charging into the nothingness that surrounds us with no direction to go. I spent hours, days, months, daydreaming of what my life could be one day. All the possibilities out in this world for a girl like me, only to have my dreams shattered like glass the second I shared with others. There were no possibilities out there for me. I had one dream to fulfill, and that belonged to my coven. That dream was never my own. I was the chosen one, all right, chosen by them to exploit my gifts for their gain and keep me a prisoner when I was meant to roam free. My job later in life. I drew in lost or stranded motorists passing through. A recruiter of sorts, as the coven had many uses for these people. These were generally men for free labor. Many had money the elders took, and some were simply to add to our ever-growing gene pool. I had an ability to feel energy from miles away. That was a skill I distinctly remember being almost forced to develop at a rapid pace, and rigorously tested to stretch my senses to feel even the tiniest hint of any ability in another being. Untapped supernatural energy was difficult to detect, but was a big gift for us. That was magic to groom and increase our already wide range of talents. From there, I simply planted the seed, the idea to follow the siren song straight to me. That was a far easier task than one with developed natural skills. We are a greedy bunch, and the coven had me try anything. It worked once or twice. Although, once the elders spoke with the people, they left. Called us a creepy, misguided cult. Told the elders we had no idea the true tenets of what we claimed to follow in beliefs, going so far as to call us hypocrites. That definitely made me begin to question what exactly this entire city of our own in nowhere was meant for. What was the necessary separation from mainstream society really about? So with my curiosity piqued, I began to do some forbidden research. unchaperoned, unauthorized, and I found the unedited versions of the facts we had been taught all our lives. I found the book about our three goddesses. Now our teachings of harmony, balance, respect, and preservation, all true. However, misuse or exploiting of gifts as mine, completely segregating ourselves in the world we benefit from participating in. That's a horrible misinterpretation of anything in this book. I must admit, it took some time for all the information I found to sink in. I had so many questions I simply could not answer. I had as much information as I could gather, and I recall what I was taught. I know the evident questions, but there was one big question that nagged me, a thought I couldn't shake no matter what I did. Even though that book said we were violating so much using my gifts as we do, yet I don't feel a bit bad about it. Why? Is that because I was held back so much by the fear I would become too powerful one day and would be beyond help? So to actually use my powers at full wattage, I am taking full advantage of that final glimpse of freedom. Or was that control based on fear? I simply couldn't have been controlled if allowed to reach my full potential. This actually makes me question even more about my life. Why we moved out here and claimed this land ours? Why do we teach one way to live but make certain things okay later? Simply out of convenience or immediate gratification of our needs. And the big question? Why does none of it really bother me? I rather enjoy messing with the minds of unwitting travelers. I love to reach out until my invisible hand taps that spark of energy, letting me know I found natural magic. The tingle at my fingertips, if it is a light magic, pure and untouched. Exciting, and makes me actually hunger for that power to have as my own. Although I felt darkness too. I never drew any of those people back here, concerned for the potential harm befalling my coven. But to touch it, to have it caress my hand as it passes in the distance, almost welcoming, very aware I am out here. I wanted to wrap my hands around that comfort, to melt it into its embrace. I know it should have felt terribly wrong, going against every value I was told to hold dear. I can't understand why inside it fits. Just as I find living out here suits, the solitude, the darkness. I don't mind, it feels all-consuming. It's comforting to me and not scary as I am told it should be. After much thought, I decided it best to seek advice from one of our elders. I didn't want to go to my parents with any of this, and the elders are sworn to protect the privacy of certain discussions, such as confessionals. Am I really having a crisis? Am I truly torn between my teachings of light when darkness feels so much better a fit? Ugh. My head may just explode with all of this in my mind. At first light, I get up and ready for the day. I needed to seek out an elder and have a chat, if at all possible. Luckily, it hadn't taken long to find several elders out on a morning walk. I felt bad rushing over to interrupt their morning, but I needed one of them to speak with. I don't know if I could have handled speaking to their entire group as freely as I needed to. I found quickly as I approached the elders that any conversation was not going to be private or one-on-one with these elders. All I mentioned was that I had questions concerning reading I had been doing and certain activities they have me participating in as of late. I never mentioned a thing about dark thoughts, although I got many raised eyebrows from the group of elders. I was told to follow them to the conference hall we used, sort of as a church would be. We simply worshipped a different holy triad. Once inside with the elders, Doors closed, they began pelting me with questions, badgering me as if I were a criminal because I stopped them to ask for any clarifications. Nothing was more for me to question. I was to do as I was told. That was my destined path. Destined path. Ha. Now they have a direct line to the fates and they know all of our futures, or is this still all about control? That's all my life had been. I was a controlled captive out in this forgotten land. I had no options to leave or a way out if I had wished to. I had nowhere to go. My family was here. Beyond that, I was never allowed to see what was beyond this vast wasteland we made home. I was only ever told about the negative existing beyond our boundaries. I knew one day problems would arise with this one. She is a descendant of Lorelei, one of the men began as another cut him off as quickly as he could. I stand from my seat and suddenly felt anger begin to build in my belly as I stared at these men before me. I take in a deep breath, exhaling as I lean forward, placing my balled-up fists on the table. What's that about my grandmother, gentlemen? They each glared at me for daring to stand or question them aggressively for that matter. Young lady, take your seat now, another elder demands. My head jerks his direction. My eyes lock on his, and the word came before I could even think. No. I nearly released with a growl. Several of the others aghast at what I had said. Murmurs and grumbles pass around the table while no one speaks a word to me. All because I said no. But I could only take so much. I only had a few questions. Why won't they help? Why are they treating me as I had committed some heinous act when I simply didn't wish to do as they wanted? My body began to react, and I felt as my own control of my mind was being pushed back by some invading soul. My arms flew up, and I let out a scream. The glass in the windows of the conference room began to explode. The men ducked for cover below the tables when a powerful gust of wind blew through the room, spraying shattered glass everywhere, toppling shelving and other furniture around me, leaving me completely untouched. As my scream faded, the wind slowed to a breeze, finally ending as my voice stopped due to the lack of air. I stood softly panting, watching the men, one by one, peek over the table. My arms down at my sides, waiting for them to move, praying one would dare challenge me right now. Who do these men think they are? What did any of us have to answer to them for a thing? Where in their preaching was it stated that these elders could treat any one of the coven as they had me? For a simple question. They are clearly the hypocrites, as that one visitor pointed out not long ago. All these years of teachings directing us one way. Then I developed gifts none of these men could imagine possessing. Suddenly it's okay to use a young girl to do their bidding. And what was this issue? And how had any of this had to do with my grandmother? A woman I only knew of in name. We moved near the time of my birth, and there was no grave marker to even visit her, since we can't leave. Slowly the men began to stand, moving out from below the table, many red-faced and glaring at me, irate. Although I found it amusing, a couple of these elders truly looked nervous. I yelled out, feeling a bit annoyed myself, noting many of the disapproving faces. Now, it is all of your turn to sit, or you shall face much worse. Staring back at me confused, a few snarled as if to ask, how dare I speak to them that way? My hand jerked forward, emitting a blast, knocking each of these elders back. Some were lucky enough to land in chairs. The rest, I take it the floor worked too. Suddenly, I felt this warm energy coursing through me I never felt before. Rage, elation at what I had done to get their attention, the power I suddenly felt having so much control over this situation. Something primal awoke deep within my core. I had surpassed my boiling point. A lifetime under their thumbs was plenty, and I refused to stand for this another damn day. I could only watch these men sit so confused and evidently uneasy. My fist balled up again as I leaned back over the table, glaring into each of their pathetic faces. Now, one of you will tell me what you meant about some issue you apparently have with my deceased grandmother. Lowering my head, staring menacingly at the men, knowing I have their full attention, might not scare them a little more. When no one immediately answered, I raised one hand into the air and shot that big-mouth elder that made the original comment mentioning Lorelei across the room. He hit that painted brick with a grunt and fell to the floor in a heap. Gasps from each of the elders, yet no one moved to help him. One of the men, the elder who appeared most panicked, walked on his knees towards that table. His eyes moved up towards me as he speaks, pleading, "Please, no more." He stops, glancing around the room as the others remain silent. With a huff, he looks back up to me, waving his hands animatedly towards me. "I will tell you everything, please," he begs. "Just no more." I purse my lips, folding my arms at my chest as I straighten to full height. "Fine." I tilt my head to the side. "You gentlemen sit, and I run this meeting from here on out. You answer my questions, and you all leave in one piece." Smirking towards the elder, feeling his nervous energy rolling towards me as he scrambled to grab a chair to sit at the table. The others did the same under my watchful eye. Not one moved to their fallen brethren, still unconscious after hitting that brick wall. The elders sat around the table, all too eager and ready to spill their guts. This incredible story began to unfold before me, and had I not been so focused on my rage at that moment, I may have been absolutely floored by the tale I was hearing. My grandmother Lorelei was a very powerful woman by their accounts. I had only been told what my parents wished to speak, and I never met her, so I had to take their word and listen carefully. Lorelei had many issues with several elders over the years, including a few sitting before me today. I wasn't given precise details, but the truth behind our move was a disagreement with Lorelei. She never died, as we were led to believe, or at least me. When the initial proposal of this move had been mentioned, Lorelei was the first to speak against it. She had no qualms telling the elders in front of the entire coven what she thought of each one of them, as well as their idea to break off from society altogether. She had done the one thing the coven elders would not tolerate: defiance, especially in front of the coven that they led. And these chauvinistic pigs didn't appreciate the words coming from a woman. They had her forcibly removed from that meeting, and she was never seen again by my family. Her death explained as natural causes due to age while she awaited their version of a trial. A very quick funeral had held to appease the family. The coven was packed and on the move within the week. This was sold to all as a way to preserve our way of life, as the Amish preserve their ways. These old elders had only wished the same. Obviously, the Amish are kind of different than what we are, but I could feel myself trembling as my body began to almost burst with the anger that had built hearing their words. There was still something missing in their story. Why would her protest to this move set so much into motion simply because a woman spoke out against these elders? My arm jerked forward, as if grabbing one of these elders by the neck in my hand. He levitated into the air, choking and sputtering as he slapped invisible hands around his throat. I felt my brow rise as I glanced around the room at all these stunned men. Someone better fill in the missing details or you will all be replaced quickly, starting with this one. I got sudden movement in my periphery. My other arm jerked that direction and I sent out a blast. An elder was trying to stop me with his magic and my blast caught him in the chest, shooting him through one of those window openings, landing in shattered glass covering the ground. My other hand choking the other elder flung that the other direction, sending that elder out a window opening on the opposite wall, and he too landed in a pile of glass outside. The strangest feeling shot through my body like fire in my veins. My head fell back as a binding spell began to leave my lips. I was too fast. The other elders had no chance to react before I finished my spell. Their powers bound. They fell back to their seats as if the energy had been drained from them entirely. My mother's voice from behind me caused me to jerk around in shock. "Maya, please!" I could see she was in tears as she looked from me, then turning to assess the damage around me. I watched as my mother approached me from the front door of the building, her hands shaking as she looked into my eyes. I noticed she glared at several of the elders before she managed to make it to me, taking my hands gently in hers when she spoke. "Your grandmother was banished. We weren't supposed to know, but I found out." Mother cleared her throat to continue as she wiped a tear from her cheek. She was charged with using dark magic because she was too powerful, accused of using her abilities as a siren to... She averted her gaze from mine. She was accused of many things by several elders who were not so innocent themselves, my mother finished. I shook my head towards her, not understanding, and asked, "Then why hide? Why the move if she was banished?" My mother bows her head, rubbing the back of my hand with her thumbs as she bit her lip. Lorelei didn't fit with these coven beliefs. Her powers were meant for other purposes. She raises her face so her eyes meet. "As were yours, Maya," gulping noticeably before she continues. "We thought we could fight it. That if we just kept you hidden, that we could control this. But we can't." Raising one hand to her face as one more tear fell, she wiped it away, gave her head a shake. "Mother, I don't understand. Please, what does this mean?" I asked, looking to her. She could only sob. One of the elders spoke from the table, causing both Mother and I to look his way. "You are meant to be with Lorelei. You're a succubus, an enchantress, a siren, meant for dark deeds. You are a cursed child." My mother screamed at him, shaking her fist. "She is not cursed. She is no demon, and neither was my mother Lorelei." Her voice shrill as she went on. "Their power was never meant to be confined and used only at your choosing. Now you are paying for your mistakes. We all will if you don't change your ways." I couldn't believe it when my mother turned to me, her voice urgent. "You must go. Find Lorelei. Your grandmother will help you. But you have to go before anyone has a chance to see any of this." Her breath became rapid. "You don't know what the coven could do if they see this." Her eyes pleading as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please, Maya, you must go. They nearly killed Lorelei for these same accusations." My mother slips a brooch into my hand, closing my fingers over it. That's hers. It's charmed to lead you to her. Find the highway, go north, and you will feel her when she nears. I was stunned and could only ask my mother how. I had no idea how I would leave this compound without walls, our home surrounded by literally nothing for miles. What was I to do? Mother's delicate hand raised to caress my cheek. Use your gifts, just as these men made you bring people here. Maya, you can find a way. Hearing shouts and yelling coming towards the buildings, my mother panics and pushes me towards the back door. Hurry, she tells me. She flings open that back door and tells me to run. I had enough time to see several people nearing that open front door, giving my mother one last look. I did what she said, and I ran. I ran for what seemed as 20 miles, looking over my shoulder the entire way. I had seen no one since I had left my mother at that door. Stopping to finally catch my breath, I realized I was truly on my own. I had to come up with some plan, but how when my entire life, nearly every thought I had been dictated to me? I had to collect myself, remember what my mother told me to do. Opening my hand, I noticed that brooch I held so tight while I ran left a print in my palm. I take in several deep cleansing breaths, focusing on stretching out my senses. I've done it so many times before. I needed to find a way out of here. I still don't understand how this brooch will help me find a woman I never met without some sort of locate spell, which I had nothing to do with, so the highway close by must be packed, as the energy was muffled that I was getting back. I couldn't get any feeling of magic anywhere except that brooch in my hand. I glanced down, holding my hand up to inspect it. I closed my eyes, trying to tap into her energy. I can feel it. I could feel her. Her energy was somehow familiar, even though I cannot recall ever knowing Lorelei. Without realizing, I'd kept walking as I thought, and when I glanced back, the spot I originally stopped running was way in the distance. I tried stretching my senses to call someone to me, but I wasn't feeling anything, as when the coven made me call to strangers to unwittingly join our group. I was becoming furious and frustrated rather quickly and just kept walking faster. My mind was running at phenomenal speeds. All my earlier questions still not answered, and new questions with what I was told today. Was Lorelei really some dark enchantress? Am I? What would they need me to keep me hidden from? My true nature? I walked and my thoughts churned. I was mulling everything over repeatedly and all along getting no closer to a real answer. Spotting a boulder that was flat on top just ahead, I decided to stop and take a break for a moment. I hopped up on the boulder, surveying the area around me. I thought I could hear cars or a car off in the distance to my one side, which led me to assume the highway was getting close. I could no longer see any of the land surrounding my former home. That will forever be a memory to me now, unless there is some way to go back and retrieve my family. However, that is a risk I cannot take at this time. Returning is simply not an option. Tears began stinging my eyes at the realization I may never see them again. I never even got to say goodbye. I had no chance to tell my mother I love her. I pull my legs up tight to my body as I begin to sob into my arms folded over my knees. I startle catching something that sounds as it's coming my way. Down the road, I see a car barreling towards me. I puff my cheeks out, blowing out a breath, not sure if I should be relieved or concerned at whom this may be. I've never really done this hitchhiking thing, although I just demonstrated I am powerful enough to take a ride from nearly anyone. As the car approached, I tried stretching out my senses to see if I could identify the driver. That's when I noticed a strange, warm tingle in my hand, still holding that brooch. I was too busy examining my hand to notice that the car had slowed, and next I knew it was pulling over for me. Jumping down from the boulder, I hear the car door open, unable to see anyone in the car. I look up. There's a smiling face over the roof of the car from the driver's side. A kindly-looking woman giving me a raised brow. "So, you ready to go have some fun with Grandma?" She giggles. My head and neck jet forward, surprised as I call out, almost questioning, "Lorelei?" She offers me a nod and a wink. "The one and only, sugar." Scrunching her nose at me, she motions her head towards the passenger door. "Hop in. I take it we need to talk." Maybe it was the disbelief I was still in after all that had transpired. But I hesitated, and she noticed. Tipping her head to the side, she smirks. "Our problem is we weren't meant to be led by a bunch of men who obviously have no clue what they're doing." I snort involuntarily at her comment, which makes her smile widen. "Come on, honey. We can do introductions in the car." Nodding, I glance around quickly before I reach to open the car door. My life officially changes now. My family left behind with no idea how to get them back. I have a grandmother I thought was dead. Now I get to learn my full potential, and on my own. No one to hover over my shoulder and intentionally try to dumb me down so I wouldn't be too powerful to control. To learn to be a siren and explore all the gifts that come with that. Maybe I will learn why that dark feeling always seemed to fit a bit better than almost anything else. I don't know. That kindly, sweet-faced woman in the car doesn't appear to be so dark. Or a dark spellcaster. Finally, I open the door and take a seat in the car, closing the door behind me. Glancing over, I notice her fragile hand out, offering to shake mine, and she smiles. "I am the infamous Lorelei. Pleasure to meet you, dear." I giggle. "Nice to meet you. I am Maya Lorelei Winter, your granddaughter." She makes an O shape with her mouth, furrowing her brow. "Winter, huh? That's rough." Popping the car in gear, shrugging her shoulders, she jokes, "Well, I guess even the best of us can wind up a crone." Turning towards me, giving a mischievous brow with a wicked smirk. "You want Grandma to show you how that won't happen to us, ever?" I bite my lip, trying not to smile at her overly eager and so pleasant demeanor. "I would rather enjoy that, I think." She jerks the steering wheel to flip the car around in the road with a cackle. "Oh, honey, I assure you, you will enjoy all life has in store for you. Just stay close and buckle up. Things can get a little bumpy when old Grandma hits the road." I couldn't help but bust up laughing as she straightens the car out, mashing that gas pedal to the floor. "Okay," I start. "But if you're going to be teaching me all sorts of new things, you think we can get the old Grandma bit?" Lorelei's face very straight as she glances my way. "As far as I'm concerned, that's just between us. I have a reputation to protect after all." I lean my head back on the seat, laughing again as she pats a hand over her hair. "Okay, so maybe she's not a dark witch, but at least she can definitely teach me to listen up and have some fun with my powers. I'll finally get to live free. Maybe call a guy to me for the right reasons, not just because it happens to be a gift others need for use. This is the beginning of my next story, my next chapter in life. The maiden leaving home at the loving sacrifice of the mother. And dear God, the crone is leading the way. Should I be nervous? Is it bad that I'm not?